Evening. Hopefully this works for everyone and you're glad you didn't have to go out in the cold to join us for this discussion. My name is Megan Vitale. I'm Principal Transportation Planner with the Syracuse Metropolitan Transportation Council. We have some of our staff joining us here tonight. Aaron McKeon actually used to work for us and has migrated to a new position at the Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board, kind of our sister agency. So he's still around, and he managed this project from the beginning. So he has graciously agreed to be here tonight to help answer some questions about the study. We also have Andrew Frazier and Thomas Bardenett from our staff who will be helping us out with the Zoom controls. So I know some people joined since I first mentioned. Everyone is muted upon joining the meeting. I'm going to give just a brief little introduction and then we'll open it up for questions. So in order to ask a question, you do need to raise your hand. You can hover over the bottom of your screen and you should see a button that says reactions. And then if you click on that, you should see a button that says raise hand. So if you raise your hand, one of the hosts of the meeting will send you a request to unmute. You can also send a chat to the meeting hosts. They won't go to everybody in the meeting, but you can send a chat if you have a question and one of us will read it out, or if you're having any difficulties with the interface, you can let us know. If none of that is working and you just wave your hands wildly, we'll try to call on you. So, and I did put into the chat, I'll put it there again for people that joined after, some instructions on using Zoom from our website. So I hope everybody was able to watch the presentation that was on the website for the Skaneateles pedestrian study. That's what we're discussing tonight. I hope everybody's in the right place. We're not going to play that presentation again. So we're going to just jump right into some discussion on that. Hopefully everyone also got a chance maybe to watch the presentation about who is the SMTC. So you have a little intro to who we are. One of the things I just wanted to address up front, many of you sent in comments via email or through the comment form on the website or with your Zoom registration. So we really appreciate that. I've tried to respond to many of you. Some of you I know I still owe responses. Hopefully we'll address some of the questions tonight as well. But one of the things was a question about, I think, just kind of clarifying who we are as the SMTC and what we're able to recommend or do in our studies. So we are a planning agency and we don't own any infrastructure. We don't implement any projects. So agencies like the New York State Department of Transportation, who was on the study advisory committee for this study, they own the infrastructure. So they own Route 20 through the village. Anything that comes out of one of our planning studies is really up to those facility owners and the municipality to decide to pursue. So when our study ends, any of the concepts that have been developed through this study, it's really up to the municipality whether they want to pursue that with the state DOT. And part of the reasoning behind this study, this planning study being done now, was that the state DOT has indicated that they will have a paving project on Route 20 within the next 5 years or so. So this was an opportunity to get ahead of that and to look for opportunities to incorporate more pedestrian friendly changes to primarily the striping on the road. So we were really looking for relatively low cost changes that could be incorporated into the already planned project. So I know I saw some comments come in from people saying you should move the curbs, or you should narrow the road, or you should make the sidewalk a lot wider. And we'll document all of those suggestions, but those are much bigger changes with a much higher cost that probably can't be incorporated into the project, that the paving project, again, that the state is anticipating doing at this point. So that would require a lot more discussion between the state and the village to see if there's any opportunity to make those changes in the longer term future. So I wanted to just address that one up front. I did want to assure everyone that this was led by a study advisory committee that was made up of various the village board, fire department, police, chamber of commerce, town representative, the Syracuse Onondaga County Planning Agency, and the state DOT. So we have heard a lot of feedback from that advisory committee in getting the concepts where they are today and what was presented in the video. We really do want to hear from you. You know, we got quite a few comments on move the crosswalk in front of the gazebo or don't move the crosswalk in front of the gazebo. And those are all valid comments, and we'll document that. And we're not saying for sure that anything is going to be moved. We still want to hear from you. We want all that to be documented in the study report. We also got a few questions in about truck traffic, and we will definitely pass those concerns along to the state DOT. But Route 20 is part of the national highway system. And this study from the get-go was focused on making the village more pedestrian friendly by incorporating, the things we showed, like new crosswalks or curb extensions, slowing down traffic, just to overall improve that pedestrian friendliness in the village. I think those are, we did do some traffic analysis. I know there were some questions about changing some of the lane configurations, how that would impact, say, how adding turn lanes or reducing lanes would impact the operations. We did do some of that analysis, and overall we felt like the concepts that were shown would have a relatively minimal impact and were reasonable to consider moving forward in this, again, planning level study. I think those are all the points I really wanted to hit on from the questions that we got in already. I also will put into the chat some links to previous studies that we have done. Sorry, just seeing something coming in the chat. We do have quite a few studies that we have done for the village or the town of Skaneateles. In the recent past, we did get some questions about where people feel like new sidewalk should be added. And we did a recent study that looked at sidewalk prioritization in the village. So I'm going to put some links into the chat that go to some of our other studies in the Skaneateles area that I think will address some of those questions as well. So that was a lot for me to say. Aaron, was there any other key points we wanted to make up front?
No, I think just reiterating that, these are preliminary design concepts. We worked with a study advisory committee to adjust them to what, originally, our office came up with some ideas that were, a different set of ideas. We worked with the study advisory committee to try to tailor them to what would work in the village. So that's what has been shown in that PowerPoint that's online. And again, hopefully you've all taken a look at that. But I'm looking forward to a good conversation about those ideas, the ideas that we generated and have talked through the SAC and other ideas that are percolating within the village.
Okay. So I see a hand raised. All right. Jessica Millman, you should be able to unmute.
So we've got two of us here. So this will be Toby's turn, and then you can come back around to my question.
Okay, that's fine.
Hello, everybody. I'm Toby Millman. We live on West Lake Street. First of all, I want to thank you all for doing this work. I mean, it's really impressive. But Jessica and I are kind of in the planning and development world, and a lot of what we saw in here is really, I think, represents a lot of the best practices we're familiar with. So thank you again for putting a lot of thoughtful time and effort into this. One question I had was on the, you mentioned about not being able to extend the curbs on Route 20 in the near term. But I do wonder if, for sort of planning purposes, it might be helpful in this document to sort of document how the curbs could be extended, so that if the state does have money or some other source of funds does come in, or at some future date, there's some documentation of how the curbs could be extended, so it's not sort of forgotten or lost in the shuffle. That's just maybe a recommendation. One other question or comment I have is, I noticed that the study did not extend down West Lake Street at all, and I understand why that might not be the case, but you should know that we do get a fair amount of pedestrian traffic down West Lake Street, and people, both tourists and people accessing their vehicles that are parked on West Lake Street. There is a sidewalk to nowhere on the south side that just dead ends, and there's no way for people, there's no crosswalk there, there's no way for people to get to the other side of West Lake Street when they hit that spot. It's just something maybe that it probably wouldn't take much to add in your study, a crosswalk, a recommendation for a crosswalk there, because I think it would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, on Westlake, that really was not, that just was not our study area. We were really focused on Route 20 and crossings of Route 20. But at one point, we did take a little bit of a look at West Lake Street, and I can't remember. I mean, my impression is that there's really nothing. I shouldn't say that there's no reason to put in a crosswalk. It always depends on, say, like site distance and general engineering considerations. So until you've kind of looked at it in detail, you don't want to just say that's a fine place for a crosswalk. Yeah, I think that's a legitimate question. That
yeah, again, I mean, it's just there's a sidewalk that just ends.
Yeah. Yep.
On the east side of West Lake Street.
But one of the other I'm sorry, one of the other things you brought up was the question of the permanent, like a permanent curb extension or long term, actually putting in, the raised curbs and doing that, sort of on a permanent basis. We took the attitude that the painted in curb extension could theoretically be like a bridge to that. So you could paint in those curb extensions. That's done in a lot of different places as sort of a preliminary to the long-term thing, see how it works. You can observe it over time. You could, you could even see how, like, does the snow, do tracks in the snow indicate that people are sort of following that track of that? The curb extension changes the radius for turning vehicles. So it raises the question of, will emergency vehicles be able to use it? Will large trucks be able to use it safely? And so you could use the painted curb extension as sort of a test over time to see how it worked. But yeah, I do like that suggestion of sort of encoding that as a long-term concept in the suggestions.
I'm seeing a fiscal hand raising for
Yeah.
Vanessa Yates.
Yep, I was just seeing that. Can you send her a request to unmute? Find her in my list. Okay, I did it. She should.
Thanks. We couldn't.
Yep.
I couldn't figure out how to raise a hand electronically. So.
Okay, sorry. It should pop up for you at the bottom of the screen, but go ahead. Yep.
Okay. I guess one of my concerns was the discussion about the Fennel Street, Jordan Street intersection. And I'm really worried about the ability, truck traffic from Route 20 to Tops and the drugstores and whatnot out on Fennel Street. Right now, they're using the Hannum Street, the Kelly Street Bridge, which is a whole nother story, and some other ways. But really, the only way to get back there is through that intersection. And I think we need to be careful in whatever we do with that crosswalk, not to make that corner something that the trucks are going to have a problem with. So they'll look for the next easiest solution, which might be another unintended consequence.
Yeah, and that was an intersection actually that we looked at in a previous study. That was our Skaneateles multi-use corridor study. So that concept that was shown in this study presentation came from a study that we had done a few years ago, looking at bringing some trails in from the town into the village. So that was just an idea we were kind of bringing back from that old study. Any of these things, again, would have to be looked at from a much more detailed engineering perspective. You know, when transportation engineers look at that, they can look at the turning radius necessary for trucks. So that might need to be adjusted a bit. You know, again, we're doing a planning level study. They're not engineering level designs, but we'll certainly document that concern.
I know that people, when we live a block from there, so I cross that intersection a lot. And and typically, because that Fennel Street is such a long cross, I think typically what people will do is they'll jaywalk across towards the town hall. Maybe you put a crosswalk on that, and that across Jordan Street to get people over there, and then they can go down the street rather than take that long stroll across Fennel.
Okay.
Yeah, that's something to look at. Yeah, that's just a tough intersection. And you know, a lot of the ideas that we've thrown out there do involve adjusting the essentially the turn radius, the curb radius. And it's certainly a concern. And as Megan says, it would have to be, it would have to be engineered in such a way that it could accommodate vehicles of all sizes. What I can say is these are best practices. This is something that is done a lot of places to reduce that crossing distance, and it can work.
All right, so back to Jessica again.
Okay, now it's my turn. So I too want to thank you very much for such a thoughtful study. I really appreciate everything that you've done and agree with almost everything. I have some favorite in terms of when you presented concepts A and B. I have a couple faves, but I really love the raised bed crosswalks. I love the median striping. I do think those are best practices that will in fact assist pedestrians and frankly drivers as well. Two things though that I think could be augmented, and I apologize if they're already in here, but I'm wondering why we don't have crosswalk signals that are just automatically giving pedestrians the right to cross when the light is red. It is a huge problem. I've been talking about this actually ever since we moved, and it's kind of now it's funny when we're standing and seeing tourists that are have missed their the rotation because they don't realize that you actually have to push the button in order to get the walk signal, and then they jaywalk because they're frustrated. So I just think, for ease of movement, for the benefit to our retail establishments, in the ease of shoppers going crossing the street to go back and forth to the different venues, I think is really, really important. And frankly, aren't we trying to go touchless as much as possible? So that just seems like an easy thing. And then you'd mentioned the trucks, which I do think is an issue that maybe does transcend this report, definitely transcends this report. But I'm wondering if you considered reducing speed limits or recommending the reduction of speed limits as you traverse through the village. I actually think that's a huge solution to truck traffic. The reason why we have so much truck traffic is because people use GPS or Waze or whatever, Google Maps to get from place to place, and the route is going to take you the fastest route possible. And so if you can slow down your speed limits, automatically all those GPS layers are slowing down that route. And so it's such a simple way to at least take out, maybe some of the truck traffic, not everything, but my gosh, not only here and through the CBD, but throughout actually and around our lakes and any of the Finger Lakes that are struggling with truck traffic, all of those speeds should be reduced. And I guarantee you'll reduce truck traffic. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, that's a great comment. Those are both really great comments. I got to admit, I don't recall ever. Megan, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think we ever really did look at the speed limit reduction as an approach. And off the top of my head, I can't remember what the 85th percentile speed limit is. That's kind of the industry standard for setting the speed limit.
Yeah, I mean, I would say usually we kind of shy away from just saying reduce the speed limit as a solution or as a trap. We don't want to use a speed limit reduction as a traffic calming measure, right? Because we want to encourage lower speeds through design. So, but I think you're kind of talking about a different issue in the GPS direction. So that's not really something we've thought about before. So we will think about that.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say about the pedestrian signals, we can talk to the state about that. We can pass on that comment. I know that since spring of 2020, the city of Syracuse put all their pedestrian signals on automatic recall so that nobody has to touch the buttons. And some people were concerned that it was going to result in, poor levels of service at some intersections. I'd have to talk to the city's transportation planner to see if they actually did any study on that. I mean, anecdotally, I would say I didn't notice a huge difference. So that's something that's certainly a comment we can pass on.
It's my observation is that the walk signals if you push the walk signal, it doesn't change the timing of the lights. It only, it activates a walk signal when the vehicular green light was already going to go. So it will not, my observation, will not change the level of service or have any impact on the vehicular travel through those intersections.
Not to get too far into the weeds, but it's probably not changing the phasing of the signal. The green's still going to come up when the green comes up, but sometimes pushing, and I can't speak specifically to these signals, but sometimes in a signal timing, calling that pedestrian phase will extend the green time because there's a minimum amount of time that you have to give to pedestrians crossing the street. And sometimes that amount of time is more than you would otherwise give to the cars. So it can have an impact in general. We'd have to look into these signals in more detail to know that for sure. Okay, so I think Laurel had her hand up next. So I'll send you a request to unmute. Yep.
Actually, this is John McAllister, her husband. Did I understand that crosswalks are going to be incorporated at the corner of Kane Ave and Route 20? Because that's a tough place to cross, and there's a lot of pedestrian traffic there.
That's a great question. What we heard for that intersection, our study advisory committee was very enthusiastic about the idea of a signal, a full 3-color signal there. And so that is what we've shown in our design concepts to the best of our ability. That seems like it should work. Again, we are not state DOT, and I know that is a state DOT facility and it is their call. Based on our analysis of the data, it seems like it should work there. That is to say, it should meet the signal warrants. And with a signal there, if a signal were in place, crosswalks now become, sort of automatic. It's not necessarily automatic, but I mean, it becomes very easy and very logical to then have crosswalks across Route 20 at that intersection. Without the signal, the crosswalks are a little bit harder to, not justify, but sort of like guarantee. Again, our study advisory committee was skeptical of the appropriateness of crosswalks there absent a signal. So that's where our analysis landed. We kind of like the idea of the signal there. It seemed to clean up operations. It seemed to clean up that northbound traffic on 41A that has a hard time sometimes getting out of that intersection. So a signal seems like it would improve things there. And then it would also allow safe, you could have a pedestrian crosswalk signal there built into the signal system. It all seemed to sort of flow very nicely.
Yeah, plus the alignment of Kane Ave with
Precisely. Yep.
is very awkward for cars.
Yeah.
In addition to the crossing the road problem.
Yeah.
It compounds the road. If you're a pedestrian, it even compounds that crossing the road, because you've got people, should I turn left? Should I not? It's kind of a game of chicken because it's not a four-way stop. And
Exactly.
It's a bit of it's a bit dangerous.
Yeah. That you're kind of echoing what we heard, which is that people are having to wait for gaps in the traffic. If you're say northbound on 41A, you're having to wait for gaps in the traffic, and to add then pedestrian crossings in there as sort of another thing, another, obstacle or issue for the vehicles, that seemed to complicate matters. But again, with the signal, it seemed to work very nicely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Kathleen Zapata, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you. I just wanted to address the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit quickly. It is something that the village board is discussing. We are having conversations with the police department, with the village attorney. Obviously, no decision has been made, but it's certainly on our radar for a 25-mile-per-hour village speed limit. Secondly, one thing that we haven't touched upon with the Kane Avenue, as it's been brought up, is the fire department sits right there, and
Thank you.
the trucks coming from the fire department, the emergency vehicles, the speed they have to leave from. It's not an easy fix when you factor that in with a light and with crosswalks. So that's something that's also been brought up by the fire department. And it's something that we just have to, factor into the discussions as well. That's all.
Yes, agreed. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. That right. Exact. That was part of the discussion of that location, the fire department's needs and the need for volunteers to get to the fire department in a hurry, and then for the emergency vehicles to leave in a hurry. Yeah.
Okay, Dan and/or Lori Fisher, you should be able to unmute.
Lori's not here tonight. But Megan, I just wanted to echo or put an exclamation point on the material that I sent to you.
Yeah.
Folks, what I did is a couple of times now I've reached out to the Department of Transportation in view of the Route 81 plans through the city of Syracuse. I think they should take a real close look at the grid. I think the grid is maybe a great idea for Syracuse. Whatever they do, at least during construction, if not beyond construction, the GPS problem that I think Jessica raised is going to be huge. It's going to be an avalanche. It will have a huge impact. And if pedestrian safety is one way to, get DOT's attention, then please use it. I am very fearful. I don't know if any of you drive to Florida anytime, but if you go down Route 95, often it gets jammed up and you get pushed off into side roads. That's exactly what's going to happen potentially if it isn't planned for in terms of trucks and cars and anyway, I guess that's point number one. Point number two, Megan, is we're seeing many more long haul trucks. And I have to think that poses more of a danger, as they drive through the village. They're big, they're high, visibility is probably more of an issue. So anyway, I would just plead with you guys, whatever influence you can have on DOT, for them to think about not only Skaneateles Lake, but the other lakes. There's just going to be an avalanche of effect, at least through construction, if not beyond, on the Route 81. And again, I'll just make a point here. I am not against whatever the city of Syracuse, whatever is the best for the city of Syracuse, I'm for it. I'm just concerned there's not enough planning about the other effects, the unintended consequences.
Okay. Yes, thank you. And state DOT is on the study advisory committee for this, so we will pass that along to the representatives on the committee, and we will pass that on to our other partners at state DOT who we work with frequently as well. So, okay, Fran McCormick, you should be able to unmute.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think this was a great study, and it was so interesting to see and hear, because I watched the video, that finally we know that Westlake Road, the intersection of Kane and Route 20, has much more traffic than Eastlake Road, which has a light. So I think from all this, we're definitely going to get a light, I hope. It's just something that just probably should have been done many years ago. So I thank you for that and putting that on your two different plans. The other thing is, this might speak to the engineering questions that you might not be able to answer, but when I look at the existing numbers, the widths of Route 20 in Kane, on the west side, it's 17, on the north side, and 18, so 35, right? And then 18 and 18, that's existing, the width of the roads. And the first plan shows that it would be 14 and a half and a 6-inch, I think, in between, or 6 feet. But the point is, each of the plans bring it down to 14.5 for a huge semi-truck to turn right onto Westlake Road. And then the other one is 12 feet. Right now, when they turn, they have to go way around and they infringe upon the other lane. And they crawl onto the property on the southwest side. So I don't know how that will work. And then especially if you increase the curb, what will happen? My other question addresses when you're on Kane, you're turning right. Right now it's 9 feet wide, I think, the 2 lanes. When I turn right, it's like I really have to make my radius, I have to be careful, which I am, and I think that's easy. But if you extend that curb, what happens when you're trying to turn right? You're going to go into the north side of the Route 20. Does that make sense? So I think we have to look at the curbs, but also, I don't know how these trucks are going to be able to turn left on those narrow streets from Kane, which is great. Maybe they won't come, but I doubt it. I think it would discourage trucks. I don't know.
Here, I'm going to try to, Megan, can I share my screen? I should be able to do that, right?
You should be able to, yes. Are you going to talk about the curbs?
Well, I was just going to bring up this. This is
okay.
You can see this. This is what we're talking about, correct? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's Kane on the south and Orchard on the north. And right, so, one of the ideas we had was the striped in median, and another was to use curb extensions. And again, as we said at the Jordan Fennel intersection, when it comes to actually designing something that would go in place, for something like this with the painted curb extensions, the design would be done to an engineering level. This is a planning level, what you're looking at. This is
right.
There's been no computer modeling. Engineers have computer models at their disposal to ensure that large trucks can make a turn. This is at the conceptual level,
right?
You see, kind of what you like and what you don't like. And so the fact that you're skeptical of the idea that this would be feasible is a very legitimate concern. But just to say, there would be some degree of engineering. There's like an engineering safety net behind an idea like this.
Sure.
Okay. Certainly the striped medians, that trucks, nothing about this concept changes really how a truck maneuvers the intersection. Those striped in medians, could be traversed by a truck just fine. The idea is that it provides a visual narrowing of the street, of the roadway, to kind of, close down the intersection a little bit visually. But it doesn't do anything to how a truck would actually navigate the intersection.
Thanks, Aaron. I just wanted to add to regarding the signal at this location. I would not say that is a certainty. I don't want to give that impression.
Yes.
That is something, a couple people have commented in the chat as well, that's an idea that has been talked about for years. And yes, we are aware of that. It came up again in this study. So we looked at the traffic volumes there. There are a number of what are called warrants for a traffic signal, where engineers look at data to justify the installation of a signal. But just because the volume might meet an 8-hour or 4-hour warrant doesn't mean that a signal is required. It's not a requirement. It's a piece of data that engineers look at to say a signal might make sense here. So just because this meets the volume threshold that might indicate a signal would make sense, there are other aspects to that. And certainly the concerns, you don't want to put in a signal and then create a safety issue that doesn't already exist. So if there are issues with the slope of the road or the sight distance or anything like that, that needs to be factored into the decision about a signal as well. So I don't want to give anyone the impression that this study is saying that a signal should be installed and that is absolutely going to happen. That decision still needs to be evaluated.
But I think
more detail by state DOT.
But I thank you for pointing out that the accident, the statistics there show it's four times higher than the state's accident-wise. I think statistically, you pointed that out. A left-hand turn on Kane. Is that right?
I would have to go back and look at all of the
data
details on those accident rates.
Yeah, it was 4 times higher than the state's area. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Aaron, I'm going to stop the screen share.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Because then I can see who's raising their hand a little easier.
Yes.
So Constance Brace, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you very much. As I mentioned in my notes to you, I was really impressed with this study, and I echo everything everyone said so far. I also thought Fran's comments were very similar to my own. The idea of the trucks turning now currently from coming easterly from the west and turning down on 41, they are moving into the oncoming traffic. And also what she said, if they're coming from the east and moving west, turning south, they're also going up on the curb. You can see evidence of that. I thought if you get a light there, you can move the stop bars so that there's not that confliction that you mentioned on the East Lake side. So I think if you could add that comment to the west side, that would be helpful. I didn't put that in my comments to you, I don't think, but maybe I did. I also wanted to comment on the traffic patterns that occur because of the difficulty of turning at that intersection and getting across the intersection. As someone who lives a half block down from there, as Fran does and others who've spoken, I am constantly juggling if I'm going to go over to Orchard or right and take a left then down on Griffin. So I'm transferring traffic that might better be on Orchard over to Griffin, which is a much smaller street. And I don't think that's beneficial. And the same thing happens in reverse coming home from the city for years upon years upon years. What route do I take to avoid trying to cross? It's the always take the right turn, never have to go straight across. And so some of the traffic patterns that are documented at that intersection are flawed by the fact that people avoid crossing that intersection. And it's the same thing with pedestrians. It's a horrific intersection for both pedestrians and cars. I also wanted to ask for a response later, if you could tell us how this will be edited and move forward, and if it, what changes might be made and how it would be distributed to the DOT, because I think they need to be hit upside the head. And one other comment on the Kane side, on the west side of the intersection, southwest corner. It's very steep getting up from the curb. There is a curb cut there for it's striped as if it was accessible, but it's very steep. And in the recent weather, it's extremely slippery trying to get across there from the west side, moving towards the village for a pedestrian. So you have that combination of the steep grade for both the pedestrians and for the turning trucks. So those are all things I wanted to mention. So I think that's it. I just want to echo what everyone said. I think it seems to be a great document that reflects a lot of our experiences as residents in the community. Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate that feedback. Again, I do want to just assure everyone that State DOT was part of the study advisory committee for the study. So they have been involved in the meetings. They have seen all the concepts. Multiple, members of their staff have been involved. And we will document all the comments that we hear, everything that was emailed or submitted through the form with the responses. And the recording of this meeting will remain on our YouTube channel, and we will document a summary of this meeting, including all of those public comments, which will become part of an appendix or attachment to the study report. Once the study reports, and this goes for any of our studies, once it has been reviewed by our committees, our planning and policy committees, and acknowledged as complete, the final report will be made available on our website. So
I had one other thing I wanted to bring up that was in my comments that I sent to you. There was a comment about closing the pathway into the public lot, the drive lane that comes next to the bank, and it would be great because that's very pedestrian unfriendly currently, and that's where the public restrooms are year round across the street from the bank, one of the banks. But also I was wondering, as I mentioned in my comments, if you had looked at doing the same thing with the lane over by the creek, between the creek and the restaurants. And that really could, I think, just be a service lane for whatever services are required for the restaurants and the businesses that are back there, so that during business hours, it could be completely pedestrian friendly, maybe paved with a different material, something that would allow people to get back to Fennell Street and traverse alongside the creek and really tie into the proposed long-term creek walk that we'd like to see along that east side of Skaneateles Creek. So I don't know if that can be amended into the study, if there's the opportunity to do that, but I don't know how the businesses would feel about it, but I think it'll be a huge improvement for everybody.
Right. Yes, I did see that comment. We didn't look at that, unless, Aaron, I'm forgetting something, but I don't think we discussed that. But yeah, that's an interesting idea, something maybe with a different pavement that still could be traversed. So, I mean, we'll definitely document that comment, and we'll think about what else we might be able to do with that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. So next, I think we'll have Julie and then Martin. And I did notice that Peter was waving a hand. And Teresa, I don't know if you're raising your hand as well. No. Okay. And I did just want to say, I think there's a lot of discussion about the Kane Ave intersection. We do want to hear comments on other parts of the study as well. So hopefully people have some thoughts on some other locations. So Julie, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you so much. I want to apologize. I have really bad internet at the bottom of the hill and it keeps lagging, so I'm kind of walking around. Sorry. But anyway, I want to thank everybody for this study. It is, as we all live here and we love it. It's so long overdue. And I know Kathleen and Mary and Dan Kwasnowski and Aaron, all of you guys have put such a tremendous amount of time into it, and we, on our behalf as your shareholders, and we appreciate it. And you're going to hate me because I just wanted to mention by the firehouse, Kane Avenue and Genesee Street. Fran, I was your neighbor. I still run over there. I'm the little rabbit that dodges across the street. I actually
oh, Julie, you're cutting out a
cemetery because I wear across. We brought this up through a segment we did. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you now. Yeah, I don't know if maybe if you turn your video off,
Shoot.
sometimes we can hear better.
Better? Okay. Let me try it again. Let me try. Okay, so can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, we have the worst internet. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
So leave your video
off.
off.
Did a story. Oh, okay, perfect. So when I did a story as a journalist, And we had talked to the DOT at the time. It was just converting from a gas station to what we now know as our firehouse. Kathleen, you're totally right. That was a thing they cited. And they also cited the hill coming from your boat as a potential, you've got the velocity that you come down the hill. And at the time they said they didn't have enough data, but maybe now, or enough, maybe there wasn't the amount of traffic. We didn't have all the restaurants and tourism back then that we do now. So maybe it is a different story. And so, and in regards to when we're talking about what the Millmans had mentioned with the lights, we just installed some of those in the village of Camillus, the crosswalk, the signals. There were also some that we were looking into that make the bird chirping noise, which would potentially signal, in the summertime, people have their windows down, and groups of pedestrians who often will cross it as a herd. Like if two people go, everybody decides they're going to go, and maybe that audio signal would be helpful as well. And I have stood there many times, as many of us have, when you push the button, it's not like an actual push. It's like, you know what I mean? So I don't even think that tourists realize that you're supposed to push it. Or put your finger over the little dot, however that works. So anyway, those are just my comments. The only other thing that deeply concerns me is by the bakery across the street, where we have currently that crosswalk. And I loved the idea of putting it across from the town hall. With the parking space that's on the corner by Emma and James and the bakery, you've seen it, you don't see the people there. And I appreciate you guys focusing on that intersection as well, because I do think somebody's going to get hurt. And this is a woman whose son was hit in the sidewalk in front of Valentine's right by the Sherwood. So anything we can do to increase safety would be a great thing. And 3 weeks later, another little boy was hit. This was 2 summers ago. So anyway, thank you for this.
Yeah, interesting. I do like, that's a really good comment about the pedestrian signals that chirp. That would be a nice upgrade for those to the Jordan and State intersection pedestrian signals. Absolutely. Wait, I'm sorry, just to clarify, if I could, can we get Julie Abbott back? Is that possible?
Oh, she's still there. Do you want me
okay.
to? I can
Okay. I'm
mute
sorry.
her again.
The crosswalk now. So in our designs, we didn't adjust the location. Like we weren't moving the crosswalk at Fennel and Jordan. But somebody else had brought that up earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Do you like that idea? You want to move the crosswalk across Fennel?
Well, here's the problem. As a driver, as somebody who's trying to get through the first intersection, and then say you take a left, okay? So you're sitting and you're facing the east on Route 20, and you finally get through that intersection, and then it's everybody and their mother backed up, and you can't see with those parking spaces. I love the idea and the spirit of putting a crosswalk there. It is completely well-intended and necessary. People were crossing there anyway. The concerning part, and it's hard because I know, as our elected officials know, people don't want to take away parking spaces. But when you come around that corner, you can't always see. If there's a car there and you're going straight, you can't see people on either side. And I think people wait, as we know. We get impatient as a pedestrian, and then they just go. And especially when you get a situation where people are waiting to pull out. It's precisely what happened in front of Valentine's. This guy was trying to get out. It's truck traffic. He's a local, and he gunned it. He didn't even notice that there were kids in the crosswalk, and it wasn't his intention. He was frustrated trying to get out and had waited through so many lights. So, it is what it is. But I do think that parking space, I always look at it and think, geez, I love when I can get that space. And I also hate that I cannot see people crossing because there are cars there. But, for some of us, that's our stomping grounds. I live on the west side of the lake. I drive through that all the time. If you don't drive through that all the time, it may not be an issue for you. So it's just something I think that's important to point out. One more note I wanted to make, because we have made a ton of noise in terms of reaching out to the state DOT in my position as a legislator. And I can tell you, town supervisors, mayors, everybody's done this in the suburbs, where we feel as if our concerns are falling on deaf ears. and there is the, the out there promise that 81 and the grid, that is one project. And I totally can respect that. And that they will look into, we are being told, truck traffic coming down both sides of the lakes, the environmental impact, et cetera, et cetera. One of the ideas that's been floated, and this was from Mr. Frechette, who was the representative on this project with us, was roundabouts. So just everybody kind of think about it. I don't know if you've heard this, but they were talking about potentially doing roundabouts off the exits that would discourage trucks from coming off and then thus down either sides of our lakes. There was also discussion, I personally chuckled, but putting roundabouts on Genesee at the end of East and West Lake Street, but I think he might have misspoken at that meeting. I think he minced what they were trying to do upon further investigation. But just so you know, that's an idea that's been floated as well, along with what Jessica was saying about the reducing speed limits, which would keep our roads off the GPS systems for truckers.
We actually took that comment seriously and sketched out some preliminary ideas for roundabouts at Genesee and at East Lake and at Cane and Orchard, just to kind of see what it would look like. And it didn't look appetizing. We ran that by our study advisory committee, and the impacts to adjacent properties were just more than, frankly, it was more than we thought we could bring to you all. It just looked like too much, too many impacts to adjacent properties. And that changes the character for the village. And roundabouts are great. There's absolutely no question that roundabouts are a safety improvement, basically just about anywhere you put them in. But in this case, it just eats up so much territory. They're a big round thing, obviously. And it just didn't seem feasible for this setting.
All right, so we're gonna go to Martin. You should be able to unmute, and then Peter, I know you still are in the queue as well.
Okay, well, thank you. I've just got a few comments, and they relate to, in some ways, the whole section down through the village. One, I'm really appreciative. I was on the advisory committee that worked with you, and I think the move to using painted locations right now is a good idea in a lot of the spots in the project. For one, because I was looking at it today down in the village, when trucks were unloading to the businesses that are on the south side of Route 20, right in that high traffic area between Jordan Street and State Street. And you look at that and say, if you create the lanes and the islands the way you're talking about, there are still going to be trucks that have to deliver there because they can't go down behind the buildings and there's no other access for them. And so I think leaving the loose flexibility when those kind of things happen and allowing some time living with the painted sections and the way that those work, I think is going to benefit everybody, because it is an unusual geometry through the whole village. It's a historically built legacy kind of circumstance. It's not like you've got a clean sheet of paper and you can start determining lane widths and sidewalks and everything. And so it's optimizing what you can out of the best. And I think where you are now in the report's a really good place. Relative to the raised sidewalks and things, I think there's going to be an impact to drainage at some point that the engineers are going to have to evaluate, because you can't change all of the drainage under the streets and stuff like that there. And so somebody else can figure that out. But the other comment that I had, if you look at the Fennel Street concept that has the 2 bike lanes on it. So Fennel Street is the size that it is because it used to have the railroad right away on it. So it's a much wider street than ever. We don't really have a good solution for how to get a bicyclist through the village. And so you've got kind of a bridge to nowhere on Fennel Street because you've got plenty of lane width. Although the bicyclists have told us they don't want to go next to parked cars. And so you've seen those locations where there's an extra width and a safety zone for the bicyclist to have and stuff like that. Do you think there's any, in the work that you've done, is there any recommendation to the village, and it might be separate than a Route 20 thing, but if you think about the people that, especially in the summer, who come down State Street from Marcellus or who come down through the village, what do we do with them? They're on a bicycle. They legally can take a lane of traffic, which is what you're forced to do actually, but it's not a great thing if you've got two young children tagging along. It's one thing if you're a bicyclist and you're used to dealing with traffic. And if our future as a community is going to include electric vehicles and less internal combustion engines and more ability to get around on our own, I don't think there's a lot of options for us in the village for how to deal with that. But as a separate question at some point, I'd love to have some feedback on that, because we've got another group in the community that's trying to figure that out. And the route through the center of the village becomes one of the more tricky things. When we get more out into the community, it's a little easier to deal with. But
yeah,
those were my questions. I really think the truck unloading in the center of the village was a blind spot for me until I saw like flowers being unloaded at the florist and other things going into places. And they generally do it in the low traffic times of the day. But if you harden those lanes, then you can't get around the trucks, and the trucks actually don't have anywhere to go. So that's why I thought the painted obstacles was a really good thing.
Okay,
Otherwise,
yeah.
I really appreciate, one, all the listening that you did, and secondly, the fact that the solution is one I think everybody can look at and start saying, well, I don't know if I like everything, but egad, it's better than where we're at now.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Thanks for that comment on the Route 20 width there between Jordan and State. That was something that I think we certainly kind of played around with a few different concepts. And in the end, basically leaving it not, as you're saying, steering away from hardscaping at this point, just trying to leave it open, let everybody kind of figure out their own way of dealing with it, as needed. It seems to kind of be the way to go.
I remember a couple summers ago, the fire department parked a truck there to try and train on how they would fight a fire on the buildings. And you could still get around them, because there's sort of enough room, but it takes a little bit of care on the driver's parts to be respectful of the fact that it's an obstacle and you got to get around it. And we all deal with that driving a car. So not everybody is as patient about that, but that's not your problem. That's a driver problem.
And on the bikes, that's a good one. That is definitely something we puzzled over quite a bit. And in the end, really did not come down on with any strong recommendations, more observations that, as like you're saying, you've got a tourist friendly community. You've got an area where in the summer, you're going to have people, you're going to have families that want to bike together through the village. Kind of the go-to, when you don't have quite sufficient width to add a full bike lane, the go-to solution is usually to use sharrows, which is striping on the pavement that is there to indicate to drivers and to cyclists that the lane is intended to be shared by both drivers and cyclists. But it just didn't feel like the right solution for this case, where you've got trucks and you've got a lot of traffic.
And it's a very narrow road. There's no real accommodation. I think the people in the village use the village side streets instead of Route 20 to get where they're going for that reason.
Yeah.
And we don't have enough influx of people saying that there's, 200 bicyclists a day that go through the village, but eventually we'd love to have some way to tie it all together in a way that makes sense. But I don't know if this project's got any leeway to make that happen.
I mean, what's most frustrating is there are plenty of sections where the road is very wide. You've got plenty of width for bike lanes, and you could easily fit, a nice 5-foot, striped off bike lane that would be friendly for everybody and wouldn't impinge at all on, the traveled way. It's just that it doesn't continue all the way through the village. The roadway width kind of fluctuates. Yeah, that's the frustrating thing. So, I mean, I would think that, potentially, as the village looks at this, some combination of side streets and Route 20 would maybe be the way to go. I don't know,
Well, I have a goofy idea that won't be really popular, but I would love to put a second deck over the public parking lot And then you could take some of the parking spaces off the street because you've got more places for people to go, but that's a construction project with no funding. So
Sure.
I'll leave that for a future conversation some other time.
And yes, I think that is probably not something that's going to make it into our report, but you know,
Yeah.
I think that would
No,
be
I
cool.
wasn't trying to get that.
No, I mean, right, exactly.
I was just going to throw into the chat too, again, a link to our Skaneateles multi-use corridor study, which is not specifically on Route 20, but did look at bicycle accommodations and specifically connection to the Charlie Major Trail into the village. So somewhat related, but doesn't exactly address the comment about bikes on Route 20, but might be of interest to people as well. So I'll put that in the chat. And then we'll go to Peter. Should be able to unmute.
Thank you.
You're a little fuzzy.
I didn't have the little button to say, you know, raise your hand, but so I had to do it physically. First of all, thank you for the study. There was a lot of great information and great data on there. It's long overdue. And a lot of good comments from this group, so appreciate that. I had a couple things. I wanted to build a little bit on what Martin was just saying. As far
Peter,
as
your
the
audio is breaking up a
cyclist.
little bit.
I am a cyclist, and quite often riding through the village is scary. I try to avoid Route 20. Okay. I'll turn off my video. Try that.
Okay.
Is that any better?
Yes.
Is that any better?
It was better with your video off.
Can you hear me? Nod. It's not.
Yes, no, we can hear you. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
No?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. I don't know what happened there. I haven't had issues with that in the past. It was better with my video off.
Yes.
I can turn it off.
Yes. Leave the video off.
Okay. Can you hear me now still?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I was talking about being a cyclist through the village. Eventually you have to deal with Route 20 at some point. Now on the east side of the village, okay, on the east side of the village, you have a light at 41. So we have a light that helps us cross there. If we're on East Lake Road or East Lake Road, or on the west side, I know you don't want to talk about Kane Ave, but Kane Ave can be really scary. We try to avoid being on Route 20 because if you're on Route 20, you have to take a lane to turn. So the only other option is you have to ride up Orchard and you have to sit and wait. And then you have to, like a rabbit, you have to shoot across the road on your bicycle. So just for the record, I am all for some kind of a crosswalk there or a light, whatever you can do. That would be fantastic.
Oh, okay.
The other thing I'd like to talk about is the crosswalk in front of the gazebo.
Ah, yes.
There was a suggestion of maybe moving it further west, possibly in front of the Sherwood, and maybe making it raised. Sounds like a nice option. I'm wondering though, is this just going to move the congestion a little bit further west between the crosswalk at Westlake Road going over near Hannum. And then we got two crosswalks right on top of one another. Is this just going to make that area just as congested as the intersection of Jordan and Genesee? And because that is a nightmare. If you're coming down Jordan and turning right, you could be 10, 15 minutes through there to get, I guess I'm exaggerating, 15 is a long time, but you could be 10 minutes getting around the corner. So if you're local, you know how to get around town without doing that. But if you get trapped there, it can be tough. So I'll just listen to your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Must be a huge delay.
I don't know, Megan, do you want to jump in on this one at all, or?
I can. I mean, I think, in looking at an alternative location for that crosswalk, we did hear a lot from the study advisory committee about the kind of the conflicts or congestion between the existing location and the intersection at Jordan. It's just a very long distance from that existing crosswalk at the gazebo down to Hannum. So looking at, is it possible to kind of get that crosswalk more in the middle of the block, or put it more where people want to be? But yeah, I think it's a balancing act between, does it need to be by the pier? Does it need to be by the Sherwood Inn? Where's the demand? Where do people really want to cross? Again, we wanted to get feedback on that. So I don't know that there's much more to add to that discussion from our perspective, where we kind of want to hear how people feel about that.
And also, I mean, I'll just jump in and say, we know Jordan is just a busy, facility, and we know there's a lot of traffic coming south on Jordan. So trying to get that crosswalk further away toward, getting it closer to Hannum. I mean, Hannum and Westlake also are busy, but it's not going to have the same level of volume. So you're not going to see the same kind of congestion, even if you get the same exact kind of issue with lots of pedestrians going back and forth right there, you're moving it further away from basically like a vehicular hotspot or congestion point. So that was kind of the rationale there.
Yeah. I mean, the halfway point would kind of be right in front of the water department, right? But that doesn't seem like a huge pedestrian generator. So, we're trying to balance all of those competing objectives for where to put that crosswalk. Okay. Carol is physically raising her hand. You should be able to unmute.
Thank you. I want to say that I like the idea of the raised crosswalks. I think that will slow traffic down and make it clear where the crosswalks are going to be. But I was wondering, you mentioned that some of the physical things like moving curbs and stuff, it's not something the state would pay for. Is just raising the crosswalk something that they would be able to just fit into their plans?
Question. Frankly, I don't know the answer, but the nice thing about that particular treatment, the raised crosswalk, is it's not very expensive. None of the, we've looked at examples and, searched through different, the sources, the literature out there. It's a $10,000 to maybe $20,000 improvement, which as infrastructure goes, is really not that bad. Considering the potential benefits, that cost is really not bad at all. I don't know. We frankly, figuring out what exactly pieces the state would and would not pay for, that can be a little bit tricky. And I'd hate to kind of commit to saying that they absolutely would. But it does seem justified, and it seems like a reasonable safety improvement. The state certainly does have standard plans for raised crosswalks like that. So it's not something that's completely outside of, it's not, science fiction in their world at all. This is a standard treatment, a well-established, way to improve pedestrian safety. So, I will say it's within the realm of possibility that the state could pay for it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then Vanessa, had her hand up again. You should be able to unmute.
Yeah, Mike and I both have just a quick comment from me. The raised sidewalk, like Carol, I think that's a great idea. And I understand Marty made a comment, there may be water issues to deal with. But the other point is, without going through DOT approvals and changes, this doesn't change the GPS issue, is it'll automatically slow traffic down with having to approach those raised beds if we do them in 3 different locations, which would help with the overall speed limit simply.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other comment along with the raised bed is, I think it would be a challenge to move that crosswalk to in front of the Sherwood from the gazebo, because this is like the jaywalking capital of the world, and people are just going to walk there whether there's a crosswalk or not. So one idea that I had was that if you could, with a raised bed, put a walk, don't walk lighted, signal it somehow with walk, don't walk, and then time it with the signal on Jordan and Fennel, so that people are all crossing at the same, both at the intersection and at that crosswalk at the same time.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, we heard similar comments as we were developing these ideas. I just don't know that there is a thing like that. I know that, when you have a pedestrian crossing at a signal, that directly controls pedestrian movement across a crosswalk. But separated from that signalized intersection, I'm not aware of a traffic control device that controls pedestrian movement in that way. We looked around for different things. Pedestrians have the right of way, as long as it's reasonably safe in a crosswalk under, the motor vehicle safety regulations. Pedestrians can take the crosswalk basically whenever they want to. So that's a tricky one. That's just kind of a tough sort of frontier of traffic control devices, as far as I know.
Well, I know that I've seen devices like this on Gulf Boulevard and St. Pete Beach, right, where pedestrians want to cross in the middle of the block. They push a button, and there's a walk, don't walk that flashes and everything. I'm thinking something like that, but then somehow you run a wire or somehow from the intersection so that they can sync up the timing on it. But I don't know. Maybe it's not. Maybe it doesn't exist. But I think I've seen something like it.
Well, definitely there are plenty of examples of systems where the pedestrian pushes a button prior to crossing the street and lights flash to warn drivers that the pedestrian is entering the crosswalk. I think the other side of that, the other piece of that you're talking about, is having that only work when it's synced up to the adjacent traffic signal.
Right. That's what I think should happen.
I just don't know. I mean, I guess it's theoretically possible. I mean, from an engineering perspective, it's certainly possible. It's certainly possible. It certainly could be done. But whether or not there's this whole world of regulations about what a traffic control device can and can't do and what it can and can't look like. There's this enormous book called The Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And it sort of constrains what is and is not, legal, more or less, what you can and can't put in the public right of way safely.
Okay.
State DOT is really going to pay attention to that. But that's not to say, I mean, what you're describing sounds very practical and logical. And so it's possible that it's out there and we just don't know about it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Stephen Bosa, you can unmute.
Hey, your former co-worker said if I don't say something that I can never speak again about pedestrian safety. So he says hi. I want to continue about that crosswalk at the pier because I am a driver in the fire department, so I go through there a lot. And I think that's the worst crossing that we have, because people just continuously walk across there. And just like the previous speaker said, there are devices that I think we should have to have pedestrians all across at once. They can't just continuously walk across there, which is what they do. Even when we have our lights and sirens on, they think they can still walk across the crosswalk. So, and some lighting there would be good too at any of the crosswalks. That one's especially dark when it's raining out and at night. So, but a control device of some type, I'll find something, but I think is definitely needed there. The second thing that I'd like to talk about is jaywalking and maybe a pedestrian education program or something, because most of the jaywalkers in town are locals. They're not the tourists, and we all know who they are. But, get out of the car and make a direct route to the bakery. Come out the front door of the Sherwood, hey, let's go to the lake, and go down there. So maybe there's got to be some pedestrian enforcement police, maybe a fine, something. But people just think they can walk wherever they want to walk. So been going on for a long time. So I'll call it a pedestrian education program. How's that?
Yeah, I like that. That's something we always tend to, in these studies, we tend to circulate around the idea of what we can do, within the right of way. But that's an excellent point. I mean, some informational kiosk or signage or something like that to remind pedestrians, not to jaywalk. That can be a nice, helpful reminder.
Yeah, and maybe it's a summer job for some kids or something, but just make sure people aren't crossing all over the place, and hopefully they can all cross at once instead of everybody crossing every 30 seconds.
Yeah, thank you. That's a comment that we have heard now a couple times. The idea of like trying to pulse pedestrian traffic, keep pedestrians from being a constant trickle. Short of putting in the full signal again, I'm just not sure what the if there is a traffic control device that's appropriate to that. Maybe the Millman family has a concept.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, we can take another look at that, but I believe that the things like the rapid flashing beacons are gonna activate as soon as a pedestrian pushes that button. Yeah. Also, I think there was some concern from the advisory committee about sign clutter in the village, and some of those flashing beacons, it's a lot of lights, it's a lot of signage. I think the village would have to think about if that's what they want there. Otherwise, there are pedestrian activated traffic signals that actually stop traffic for a pedestrian crossing, but that's a whole different level of infrastructure, I would say. That would be a new signal where drivers would actually get a light, and I have to think that's not going to be appealing to state DOT so close to another 3-color traffic signal at Jordan there.
I'm thinking more, what can I do to control the pedestrian, not the vehicle?
Right.
Yes, understood. So yes, we hear you. I think a lot of these devices that are available are aimed at making pedestrians safer and giving pedestrians the right of way, frankly. So generally, that's the objective with those things like the high visibility signage and the rapid flashing beacons, is really to slow down drivers to make things safer for the pedestrians. Okay, we'll go back to the Millmans.
Sorry to interject again here, but I think there is some merit in this idea of trying to tie the pedestrian signal to the intersection. traffic signals. And I was realizing when as folks were discussing it, that I have seen like with fire stations that have their own light. Sometimes you'll see that all the lights on like the neighboring intersections at where the fire station is do turn red as well. So it does seem like there are systems out there where the lights can kind of communicate with each other. And I do think, maybe something worth at least looking into to see if there is, because I agree that like this sort of haphazard folks crossing the intersection, while I'm completely in favor of pedestrian having right of way, I do agree that the crosswalk at the gazebo does pose some challenges with traffic backing up. And to the extent that that can be sort of synchronized and people are crossing when the traffic is stopped, it probably would help both the vehicles and the pedestrians as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, we can look into it. I mean, part of the problem is that what you would be doing is essentially telling pedestrians not to cross, at a crosswalk where there is no control, you know what I mean? You're not really controlling. You could theoretically sort of control traffic on one side, on the east side at the Jordan Genesee intersection, but then there's no control on the west side for oncoming vehicles. So you'd be telling pedestrians, that it was perfectly safe, or that they couldn't cross. I don't know. It's sort of conceptually, it's just, yeah, I don't know. Again, it's just not something that you see a lot in kind of the pedestrian safety literature, which is, as Megan correctly points out, it's all sort of geared around improving things for the pedestrians. And in the village of Skaneateles, I mean, what we've observed, obviously, which you guys live with every day, is that pedestrians don't seem to feel that unsafe. They seem to be just darting out into traffic constantly, like a constant trickle of tourist traffic back and forth across 20. So, it's an added challenge. And again, you guys are very familiar with that.
So there are definitely ways to interconnect traffic signals, but we would have to do a little more research. I'm not sure that there's a way to get what you're talking about without installing a 3-color light to control it, because you have to have that traffic stop before it gets to the crosswalk. And the advisory, the flashing lights saying this is a pedestrian crossing, slow down, be aware, is very different from saying you get a red light so pedestrians can use this crosswalk. So, but we can look into that a little more. Right, we're coming up on 7 o'clock. I don't see any other hands up. Is there anybody we missed? Okay, the Yates again. Let me go ahead.
Thank you. I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but I do have one other idea on this same topic. If the red light was moved to the gazebo crosswalk, so that space in between Jordan and that crosswalk was basically a no man's land. When that light changed, there would be no cars between that space, if you see what I'm saying, right? You basically make a crosswalk that's a third of a block long, right? And then you could stop people there, traffic there, people could cross, and then when the light would just have to be long enough so that all that traffic could then clear out of there. So you'd stop them coming from the east at Jordan Street, but coming from the west at this crosswalk. It's just.
Megan,
yeah, I see what you're saying. It would definitely involve installation of a whole new set of signal heads. You wouldn't be able to remove the signal at Jordan, and you would have to have a 2-phase clearance. It's complicated. There are oftentimes you'll see that at like offset or dogleg intersection. But it does, you do lose some queuing space at the intersection.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so go back to Julie. Do we lose her? Okay, I think
We lost her.
we lost Julie Abbott. So Kathleen?
Before we end, I know we're coming up. I just wanted to thank you, Megan and Aaron and the SMTC and everybody who was on the committee. It's been a long process. It's been extremely insightful and helpful, but the SMTC has done an incredible amount of work on this. They really took about 1 billion ideas that we had and condensed them down to a really nice presentation. I think the village will be better off for it soon enough. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I know Sean, I think you were next.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
My concerns are actually opposite of what this appears to be doing. Everything is obviously focused around pedestrians, which in turn helps the businesses and everything else. What about traffic flow? Reducing lanes is not going to help traffic flow. It's going to make it worse. It's going to bunch traffic up even more and cause longer waits throughout the village. So how is that going to be resolved?
Well, I mean, our analysis is that traffic flow through the village, it's seasonal. It flows, it slows down in the summer months. That's under existing conditions. You see a pretty steep reduction in, the average speed through the village in July and August.
Having lived here for 49 years, I would disagree. It slows down from Memorial Day through the end of September. It takes a short break from the end of September until Thanksgiving, picks back up because of Dickens Christmas. And then we get our town back for January through the beginning of May. Frankly, I avoid the village as much as possible. And that's horrible to say since I've been a resident for so long, because traffic is ridiculous. There is absolutely zero, how should I say this? The police have nothing to do with pedestrians. They don't care what they're doing. They let them go. Nothing is ever done because it all revolves around the businesses, and that's all that matters, is helping the businesses. How about helping the people that live here, that need to go down to Kinney's to merely pick up a prescription?
Yeah, our objectives with the design ideas that we developed were intended to kind of make it better for everybody. So we're trying to get pedestrians out of the traveled way as quickly as possible in the interest of trying to help traffic flow a little bit better. So something like painted curb extensions or the tightening up lane widths a little bit. The objective there is to reduce the pedestrian crossing time. So that theoretically can help get pedestrians out of the traveled way a little bit more quickly. Something like the raised crosswalk, part of the objective there is to give pedestrians a more natural, safer location to cross, to try to eliminate, try to scoop up some of those jaywalkers so that they're not crossing all across that stretch between Hannum and Jordan. If we could funnel them into one very nice crossing location, that might improve, that might reduce the tendency to jaywalk a little bit. So, we're trying to achieve some sense of balance with these ideas. But yeah, certainly, part of it is that, pedestrians are out there. We know that this is a hub of pedestrian activity, and you want to have a safe village for everybody.
Yeah, I would also add, some of the concepts we looked at kind of not necessarily reduce the lanes that are out there, but make it more logical or just more defined, turn lanes, through lanes, because sometimes some of those lanes right now are very wide and there seems to be some confusion about who should be using those lanes, or can you turn from this lane, or cars trying to pass each other where the lanes are really overly wide. So, things that can delineate clearly where certain vehicles, if you're turning left, maybe a left turn lane there could improve that, the operation of that intersection, make it clear what space everybody should be in, and maybe that can improve safety overall as well. So we're really trying to look for opportunities to define those movements more clearly.
Sure. On paper, I can see where that sounds great. What about when delivery trucks are parked in the road, which now only has one lane?
Yeah, so in some of the cases, we looked at painted medians. So again, those are traversable when necessary. I think some of the concepts showed some temporary loading and unloading zones.
They're not traversable legally.
Okay, point taken. So, yeah, there are a lot of competing issues out here. We're trying to get your feedback on really it's what does the village want to prioritize?
Right. And the village only cares about itself. It doesn't care about the town or the town residents. And that's part of the issue.
Okay. Well,
I mean, I think one of the realities is, the village of Skaneateles is not likely to become less popular as a tourist destination. I don't see that in the cards. And I think trying to find a way to accommodate pedestrian activity as safely as possible is really the only practical way forward.
Okay.
Okay, I know Mary wanted to say something before we wrap up. I will unmute you, not seeing any other hands up.
I want to echo what Kathleen said, and thank you, Megan. Thank you, Aaron. This was an incredible effort, and I just think about what you did just recently, Megan, sending everybody a reminder email, reminder link, sending everybody, an additional separate email just in case the link had gone into their junk or spam or whatever. And your attention to detail and your follow-up is greatly appreciated. And SMTC has done a terrific job on this. So on behalf of the village, I thank you for all your efforts. Very much appreciated. And from the comments I've heard tonight, it makes it even clearer that this is not a simple effort.
Sure enough, yeah.
Lots of things to consider. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate that feedback. I know that the virtual meeting format always has a few hiccups, but we hope that given the circumstances, this met everyone's needs. We would definitely like to hear, I'll put my contact information in the chat if anybody has follow-up comments, or we'd definitely like to hear feedback on just this meeting format, because going forward, we're using this kind of approach to a lot of our public meetings. And, even when it's safer to hold in-person meetings again, we've had some feedback that people like this format where you can kind of watch a video on your own time and chat with us from the comfort of your own home. So we would definitely like to get feedback on that. So anything else, my contact information is in the chat, and I'll also put in here, if you are not already on the SMTC's physical mail or emailing list, you can sign up on our website so that you get any future updates from us. We send out a newsletter about every other month, just talking about projects that we're working on or general updates about transportation planning in the region. So I hope people will sign up for that and stay connected to us for this study or for other studies in the future. So, okay. I'm assuming that's a thumbs up, not another comment. Just a thumbs up. Okay.
Great.
All right. So with that, I thank everybody for your time tonight. We'll, once the study is gone through all of our committees, it'll be made available on our website, as I said. So I hope you'll watch for that. Get on our email list and you'll know when that's available. So that's it. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time and your participation.